Welcome back to another video, and today we got our Big 12 college basketball season previews. Now, we've done the Big East and ACC already. We did the ACC Monday, we did the Big East yesterday. We're doing the SEC tomorrow, Big 10 on Sunday, leading right into our college basketball debut Power 40 rankings on Monday to kick off and celebrate the start of the college basketball season. We're doing all these previews along with our Power 40 rankings, which will be coming every Monday from here on out. So if that interests you, make sure you go on there, subscribe. Not only do we do college basketball, college football is coming out every Tuesday. NFL is coming out every Wednesday. NBA usually Thursdays, not this week, but typically on Thursdays. And we also do MLB content when that season is going. Um, yeah, so if you're new around here, make sure you subscribe. Hit that notification bell to make sure you don't miss whenever we upload. And like this video if you enjoy, as well as comment your thoughts. Links in the description as always, X, Twitch, TikTok, Discord. Make sure you follow those, join those. With all that being said, though, let's just jump right into our little board we got here. We got all 16 teams going to be empty right now because we're going to reveal them one at a time. We'll start off with our worst team. I think it's going to be Oklahoma State. I mean, they fired their head coach. They bring in Western Kentucky's Steve Lutz as their new head coach. They bring in 7 transfers. I mean, they don't really bring anything back. They weren't good at all last year. I mean, it's a lot of turnaround. I do expect Oklahoma State to finish last here pretty easily. I mean, again, there's just nothing really going for them. At number 15, I have Utah. Um, they bring back Gabe Madsen, who was a solid player, and they also bring in transfer Mason Madsen. So they have those two are brothers. They did win over 20 games last year, I believe, and did make it a little bit far in the NIT. But I mean, they lose 5 of their top 6 scorers from last year. I mean, it's pretty much a completely different team. So that's kind of where I'm at with UConn, or not with you. I was about to say UConn with Utah. I'm still thinking about Big East from yesterday. 14, I have Colorado. Similar story here. Two Pac-12 teams coming into the Big 12 this year, and well, there actually is another one. There's actually 2 other ones, but I don't think they these two at least have very much success. I mean, Colorado loses Tristan da Silva, KJ Simpson, and Cody Williams. The team's 5 leading scorers from last year are gone. I mean, they've brought in transfers from Division Two. It doesn't look very good for Colorado. This is again kind of similar situation with Utah, where it's just a completely new team, and they've lost pretty much everybody who contributed anything last year. 13, I think, is where this kind of gets interesting. I think all of these teams have a sneaky chance to make some noise and maybe make a play-in appearance in the tournament. I mean, I think these 13 teams have a shot. I'm not going to say they do. Obviously, I don't think there's 13 teams from the Big 12 that get in, but I'm just saying these are the teams that I would realistically think have at least somewhat of a chance. And that's going to start off with West Virginia. Obviously, the story here is they bring over Darian DeVries as their head coach from Drake. They also bring over Tucker DeVries, who was just an absolute bucket on Drake. He's been for the past, couple of years. They bring in 11 new players. I mean, again, this is kind of just similar to the bottom 3 where they just bring in a whole new team. The difference here is they do have Tucker DeVries, and we know he is good. So if they surround him with the right pieces, maybe West Virginia could be sneaky and surprise some people this year. Um, Number 12, I have UCF. UCF actually did make some noise last year. I mean, they upset a couple of teams from last year that they probably shouldn't have. But they bring back their top 2 scorers. I believe they also have Mikey Williams. Now, don't really want to get into his whole situation. Just pointing out they have him, so he is there. Maybe he can be good. I mean, I'm not gonna pretend like he didn't do what he did. I mean, if I'm UCF, I don't want him on my team, but he is there, so we're gonna point that out. But I think UCF could be a decent team and maybe, do what they did uh, last year and maybe upset some teams and maybe actually do it more consistently and maybe get a spot in the tournament this year. Number 11, I have TCU. Kind of similar with a lot of these bottom uh, tier teams. I don't want to call them bottom tier teams, but more towards the bottom teams in the Big 12 is they got a lot of roster turnaround. TCU is going to be uh, another one of these teams. I mean, they lose 10 players from last year. They lose 9 players from last year. They bring in 9 new players. It's kind of a question mark with TCU. They're usually pretty solid, though, so I give them a little bit of credit, maybe a little bit too much. I don't know. You can argue here. At number 10, I have Arizona State. I think Bobby Hurley can, make some noise. He has this number 7 overall recruiting class. He brings in Jaden Quaintance. He flips him from Kentucky. They have a nice transfer class as well. Arizona State could be a sneaky tournament team this year. I'm actually pretty high on them. Like I said, Jaden Quaintance is going to be a huge get for them, and they bring in a whole lot of new guys now. Can they gel? That'll be the question. We'll have to wait and see with that. But just looking at roster-wise, you could argue they should even be higher. I mean, they bring in a whole lot of talent. At number 9, I have BYU. Obviously, their coach left to go to Kentucky. They are kind of. I'm not sure what to think about BYU. I mean, they bring in 2 top 50 recruits, also a top 15 recruiting class in general. But they do lose a lot from last year, so it I don't know. I really don't know what to think. I mean, they lose their coach, they lose a lot of production from last year, but they bring in a decent replacements, and I still think BYU is going to be a team that's very efficient. I feel like Ken Palm's going to love them. Ken Palm loved them last year. Um, they were a 6 seed last year, so do I think they fall all the way out? I don't know. I feel like BYU is probably a tournament team, but again, we'll have to wait and see. A lot of these teams, we're just going to have to wait and see how the roster gels. Number 8, I think this is where we get into the real legitimate, safe tournament teams, I guess. At number 8, I have Cincinnati. Cincinnati made some noise at the end of the Big 12 last season. They were 7-11 in conference, but that is better than they were expected to finish, at least. They bring back a lot of their guys from last year. Day Thomas, Dan Skillings Jr. This is an interesting Cincinnati team. I think Cincinnati should be. I mean, they were on the bubble last year. I think Cincinnati has a very good chance to be a tournament team this year. I feel like they continue to develop with a lot of their team returning. At number 7, I'm going to go Kansas State. The story here is they bring in a whole lot of transfers. Yes, they lose a lot. Jerome Tang, I do believe, is a very good coach. Last year they dealt with a lot of injuries and didn't really get to where they wanted to in year 2. But they have 8 incoming transfers led by Coleman Hawkins, Akora Core, Doug McDaniel, and there's others as well. Those 3 names alone, though, give me a lot of hope. I feel like, again, I'm going to keep saying this. I want to see them play games before I really get excited, but you look at the talent, it's there. I mean, Coleman Hawkins has a chance to be a 17-plus, points per game type of guy. He'll be the number 1 guy on this team, so he won't be behind, Terrence Shannon like he was at Illinois. So definitely going to be intriguing here with Kansas State, and I just trust Jerome Tang, really. Number 6, I have Texas Tech. This is interesting because Pop Isaacs does leave, which is a huge loss, but they bring in JT Toppin from New Mexico. They bring back a couple other transfers. They got into the tournament last year. I believe they did lose in the first round, but besides Pop Isaacs, really the rest of their team is back. Texas Tech should still be a tournament team. Maybe I wouldn't say they have the ceiling that they did last year, but I think the floor is still very much there. They're a very deep team. But now when we look into the top five for the Big 12, this is where things really get serious because I think all five of these teams have a realistic chance to be top three seeds at bare minimum when it's all said and done on Selection Sunday. I mean, I think the one and two are pretty set. I mean, you could interchange one and two, but three, four, and five again, you could interchange those any order. I wouldn't call you crazy. The team I settled on at five, and this is a very tough decision. I'm going with Baylor at five, and I don't love it. Um, a lot of people think Baylor is going to be a very good team still. I mean, most projections have Baylor finishing at three. I don't know. I mean, they bring in Jeremy Roach and Norchad Omier, which are two huge additions there from Duke and Miami. They also bring in VJ Edgecombe. He's a five-star recruit. I mean, Langston Love is gonna develop. I think he'll step into a bigger role. Yes, they lose Jacoby Walter and Yves Missy, but they pretty much make up for it in the transfer portal, and they'll have their role players continue to developing it better. So Baylor's going to be a very good team, and I don't love having them at five, but this just goes to show how good the Big 12 is. That I have a team as good as Baylor. Like I said, Baylor could be a three seed in March Madness. They could even be a two seed. I wouldn't be surprised. Baylor is a very good team. At number four, this is probably the team that most would consider to be the fifth, but I do have Arizona, and ultimately, I just believe in Caleb Love. I mean, Jaden Bradley comes back as well. I mean, Caleb Love was the Pac-12 Player of the Year last year, and he is still one of the best players, definitely top 10 player in the country. Um, the transfer class is what I'm actually very excited for, though. They bring in Oakland's Trey Townsend. You remember that Oakland team that went on a little bit of a run in March Madness? They bring in Trey Townsend, who was arguably their best player. I know Jack Golke had the great game against Kentucky, but Townsend was the best player throughout really the whole season. They bring in a lot of guys who, not necessarily from big name schools, but they were very good in their lower tier schools. They showed a lot of promise, and they chose production over talent, I guess. That's what Indiana football did this year, and they're sitting at 8-0. So Arizona, I think, is in for another great year. Yes, it's going to be a lot more competitive in the Big 12 than it was in the Pac-12 last year. But I still do believe Arizona is one of the best teams in this league, as well as definitely one of the best teams in the country. At number three, I have Iowa State. Iowa State was a two seed in March Madness last year. They won the Big 12 tournament. You could make an argument Iowa State should be higher. I mean, they also bring back Keyshawn Gilbert and Tamin Lipsey, um, who are, you know, their two best players last year. They bring back other starters as well. They had the number one defense last season in KenPom, and I don't expect that to really change. I mean, maybe it drops down a slot or two, but they're still going to be a top five defense. And they bring back Tamin Lipsey, who probably is a All-American player when it's all said and done. So this team is going to be very good, and there's a real chance Iowa State is better than they were last year, as crazy as it is to say, because they were, I believe, the seventh overall team in March Madness. They could get better, and I have them at third in the Big 12. Again, just goes to show how good and talented this roster is. Number two, I have Houston. You could argue they should be at one. I wouldn't, get mad at that. They bring back L.J. Cryer, Jawan Roberts, and Emmanuel Sharp. They bring in transfer Milos Uzan, I think that's how you say it. I'm not quite sure, but they won the Big 12 regular season last year by, I'm pretty sure, a couple games. Yes, they lose Jamal Shed, but I think Emmanuel Sharp will step into that role, similar to how Jamal Shed stepped into Marcus Sasser's role after they left. I wouldn't be surprised if he does that, and even if he doesn't, he can still be the number two guy to LJ Cryer. I mean, LJ Cryer is probably their number one guy there, so Houston's again going to be one of the best teams in the country. They could be a one seed. I mean, really, I think number one's obviously Kansas, but I think Houston, Kansas, and maybe even Iowa State could actually finish as one seeds in the NCAA tournament. Now, obviously, not all three of them won't all finish as one seeds, but I think they all three at least have a chance to, at least in my estimation at this point. But number one, it is Kansas. They bring back Hunter Dickinson. They bring back DeJuan Harris. They bring in AJ Storr and Zeke Mayo and Rylan Griffin. I mean, come on, this has got to be one of the best rosters in the. I mean, this is, in my opinion, the best roster in the Big 12, at least on paper. I said that about them last year. I had them ranked number one in the preseason, and we saw what happened with them. Now, yes, they were injured, but I mean, come on, you look at this roster. It's hard to say that they are not top three team in the country, arguably number one. I mean, are they? Who's number one in the AP poll? Because it actually might be Kansas. Um, and I wouldn't blame the AP voters if it is. I'm just curious because I honestly forgot. Yeah, it is Kansas. And yeah, it makes sense. I mean, this is arguably the best roster in college basketball on paper. AJ Storr is a huge addition, as well as Zeke Mayo. I mean, they bring back two of their best players from last year. They bring in amazing players. AJ Storr, obviously from Wisconsin. I mean, Kansas, they have one of the best, arguably the best coach in college basketball. I'd probably say second behind Dan Hurley, but Bill Self is right there. I mean, they're coming off their worst Big 12 finish under Bill Self. They finished sixth last season, I believe. It's gonna be a season where I think Kansas comes out with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. I know they're the number one team, but they don't want to finish fifth in the conference again. I think they go out there and finish first this season. I think that's probably the safest pick. So I'm going to go ahead and say that the Jayhawks do retain their spot at the top of this conference. But you can make an argument it's Houston. You can make an argument it's Iowa State. I mean, and Arizona and Baylor are talented enough to get themselves at some point in this conversation. And you've got a lot of question marks here. Texas Tech, Kansas State, Cincinnati, BYU, Arizona State, TCU, UCF, West Virginia. They all got the talent there. We kind of need to see. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if half of those teams are a lot better than I think. I mean, the Big 12 has the depth. It has the top heavy. It's more top heavy than it usually is. Usually the Big 12 is very deep, but I think it has both this year, and I think the Big 12 is arguably going to be the best conference once again now. The SEC is going to have something to say about that. We'll get to them tomorrow, so you can look forward to that tomorrow. Make sure you subscribe and turn on the noties to make sure you don't miss when we post that video, as well as whenever else we post. Like I said, we've already made our ACC and Big East prediction videos. Make sure you check those out. And make sure you check out our college football videos every Tuesday, NFL every Wednesday, college basketball, Power 40 rankings will be starting on Monday and every Monday, and then NBA every Thursday, as well as MLB content. So if any of that interests you, make sure you go down there, subscribe, comment what you think about my predictions, what you disagree, what you agree. I love to debate in the comments. It's always fun. Links in the description, as always, X, Twitch, TikTok, Discord. With all that being said, though, that's going to do it. Hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I'll see you tomorrow with our SEC season preview.